Hello, my name is Natalia Porsche and I am an immigration attorney here in the United States. And in this video, I will speak about Affidavit of Support. So the Affidavit of Support, what is this thing, right? What kind of document it is and why the United States government needs an affidavit of support, for which purpose. So the affidavit of support is the legal binding contract. Yes, it's a binding contract between a sponsor of the immigrant petition and the United States government. Okay, it's a binding contract which provides to the United States government, so the sponsor is the the sponsor will be SOR, and it's promised to the government that this intended immigrant will not become a public charge under the United States public charge law. Okay, so that's the reason why the United States government requires for intended immigrant to have an affidavit of support from a sponsor. Who can be a sponsor? Well, let's talk about the sponsor's requirement. Well, first of all, the sponsor must be the United States legal permanent resident or the United States citizen. Okay, number two, the sponsor must be a resident of the United States. So the sponsor must reside in the United States. We have some military exception. However, if let's say a sponsor resides outside, well, the question is, can the sponsor reside outside the United States? Well, yes, under limited circumstances, and in order to satisfy the requirement, the sponsor who resides outside of the United States, who doesn't have a domicile inside the United States, must show by preponderance of evidence that he or she is intending to move to the United States, and by the time the immigrant visa is available to intended immigrant, this sponsor must establish domiciled in the United States. The other interesting thing about the affidavit of support, if you have a co-sponsor, right, if the sponsor does not satisfy, the petitioner does not satisfy the requirement, the federal government governmental poverty guideline requirement, right, which is 125% above poverty line, then the petitioner must get a sponsor, another sponsor, right? So the interesting thing about that sponsor who is not petitioner can withdraw the affidavit of support at any time before the intended immigrant has a visa, goes to the visa interview, right, has a visa available. So that sponsor can withdraw the petition at any time if that sponsor is not a petitioner, right? So that is another interesting thing. Now, we talked about the residency requirement. Of course, the sponsor must be over the age of 18, reside in the United States, and must show the income which is above poverty guideline requirement, which is 125%. Okay, so how exactly do we have to calculate that amount? Now we have to take into consideration the amount of people who reside in the household. Okay, so we have specific requirements here, and the amount that the person who would like to be a sponsor must earn in order to satisfy that requirement, 125% above of poverty guideline requirement. Okay, so the very important thing about it is that you have to make sure that you put in the household size every person who is claimed as a dependent on a tax return, right? Because when the officer, the consular officer, or the United States USCIS officers, depends where the intended immigrant is. If the intended immigrant is abroad, therefore we have a consular processing here. If intended immigrant is in the United States, therefore we have a USCIS. The affidavit of support is filed with United States Citizenship Service. So, important thing to include every dependent on the tax return, the household size, Okay, you also will have to count the intended immigrant. So you have to be very careful about the size, right? The other very interesting thing about the affidavit of support is that the person who resides in the household, his or her income also can be counted, right? We have a specific requirements as far as whose income can be counted, right? But that person must reside in the household, right? And that person must be included in the household size if you would like to count his or her income. Now, the immigration status of that person is irrelevant, but that person must have at least a work permit, right? Because if that person has a work permit, that means he or she is legally working here in the United States and filing taxes, declaring the income and paying taxes from that income. That's very important. The question could be, for example, what if that person is in deportation proceeding and that person has a work permit? That's fine, as long as the United States government knows that this person is here, because the requirement under INS is that that person must have a lawful income, right? Because if that person works unlawfully in the United States, therefore this income is not lawful. So the lawful income must be from lawful sources here in the United States, right? Not from abroad. Because if that person intended, let's say if this person works abroad and if this person moves to the United States to satisfy that household size and the poverty guideline, that income requirement, therefore this person will lose that job. So this is the argument why the income must be here in the United States, the income must be lawful, so that person must have at least a work permit. So that's whom you have to include very briefly into household income, and whose income you can actually add into income, right, in order to satisfy this 125% for non-military members of income requirements. So the very interesting thing is that who is not subject of who is not subject to be for affidavit of support, who is not required to file an affidavit of support under immigration law. So for first of all, special immigrants are not required to file affidavit of support. Because why? Because they are self-petitioners. They're self-petitioners in most of the circumstances. They're juvenile in a lot of circumstances. They are not required to file an affidavit of support. Second of all, it's the U visa applicants. U visa applicants, they are not required to provide an affidavit of support. Also, T visa applicants, they are not required to provide an affidavit of support. WAWA petitioners not required to provide an affidavit of support. However, all the above that I just said, all this category of immigrant, they're still subject to the rule for public charge, right? They're still subject to public charge rule, although they're not required to file an affidavit of support. However, they are subject to a public charge rule. I hope this information was helpful. This subject was about an affidavit of support. Who must file an affidavit of support? Well, in majority of cases, you will come across this situation when you, let's say, petition your spouse or your parent or your child, United States citizen, and you petition for your parent, for your spouse, or for your child to come here into the United States. So in majority of circumstances, this kind of, you will come to cross to an affidavit of support, and then you will see if you satisfied as a petitioner the requirement to be a sponsor. If you make enough money, that's fine. Watch out for self-employed people. If on taxes, you have to look at adjusted gross income, not your gross income. It has to be adjusted gross income. Let's say you can make $1 million in your gross income, right? But you actually, when you file your taxes, you write a lot of your account, write a lot of deductions off, so you come down to $20,000. Right? So guess what? After you calculate the size of your household, you might not qualify. You might need a sponsor, right? So that's when the situation with a sponsor come into play. So watch out for these situations when you have a self-employed people, right? Because self-employed, you making much less than that's what the law provides, and you have to be careful. So speak with your accountant, speak with an experienced immigration attorney before you submit your affidavit of support. So therefore you don't need to submit your affidavit of support multiple amount of times. If you are interested in setting up a consultation with my office, call 228-229-7500. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, put thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Goodbye.